if every home and business could access the cheaper power and store it in order to power their homes and businesses in periods of high demand, then we know that this is going to ensure that the grid will have less stress and energy is essentially going to be cheaper for those domestic and business consumers. Yes, of course, electrical energy storage is dominated by the Chinese supply chain. Here in the UK, we've got a strong thermal storage base. We must not put all our eggs in one basket when it comes to our energy security and our energy mix.
Hello, it's Michael Gove here, editor of The Spectator. Alongside Wolfe Power Club, we'll be holding a fantastic energy conference on Monday the 24th of November. We'll be bringing together people from politics, from industry and from the third sector to discuss the future of energy here in the UK and across the world. Get your tickets now.
Luciana, welcome to the Wolfe Power Club, the largest energy podcast on Apple. And it's exciting times. Not only are we in the House of Lords today, and obviously in the last year you've come to the second chamber, or the greater chamber, let's say. But for our audience, you have come the inaugural chair of the Energy Storage Association that was formed this summer. What's the role? What's the Energy Storage Association?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to join you and to have this conversation today. Welcome to the House of Lords. I'm really looking forward to the chat that we're going to have and great to be a guest in your podcast, and thanks for the opportunity. So as you pointed out, I have become the inaugural chair of the Energy Storage Association, and we have just come together in recent months, in fact, formally. But it has been developed over the course of the past 2 years by our CEO. So our chief executive, Jason Howlett, was working in the sector, and he noticed very much a lack of focus and attention on all forms of energy storage, and certainly looking at things collectively. There were individual businesses that were doing some really great work individually in their respective constituencies with their constituency MPs, perhaps trying to engage with government, but nothing that brought everyone together in a cohesive way and with a singular voice. And certainly there was a gap. And if we look across the public policy landscape and the public affairs landscape in the UK, there are other sector groups that have been established and work really effectively in a coherent way, but that wasn't the case for this sector, largely in part because of its infancy. And so Jason worked very, very hard on looking about how we bring that strategy, bringing all forms of energy storage together to ensure that we have that sharper focus and specific focus on energy storage in a way that perhaps we haven't seen up until this moment. So we were engaged, and the sector came together through 3 businesses: Give Energy, Powervolt and SunSync. They are 3 British-based energy storage manufacturers who really help and who have helped to bring this gap into the national consciousness. The Energy Storage Association, in its infancy, in advance of being formally constituted, engaged with brands such as Octopus Energy. And most importantly, I think that we've also got at the core of the organisation as founding members research institutions, universities, including Keele and Durham. So at the heart of what the sector is doing is that we've got R&D and kind of the academic perspective part of the mix. So that range allows the Energy Storage Association to bring together a variety of skills, knowledge and experience to really help bring attention to energy storage in a way that we haven't yet seen so far.
Now, obviously, Parliament works in terms that the current government's going to be in place unless some shock happens until 2029 as a minimum. What would you like to achieve in the next 4 years? Because I saw you guys launched at Parliament, obviously bringing someone like yourself in that's so experienced in the political landscape. But what would you like to achieve with the government and the policy making over the next 4 years of the parliamentary term?
So forgive me, I perhaps should come back to the second part of your first question, which I didn't perhaps adequately address in terms of what brought me to this role and why I'm really proud, I think, to be the first not even I think, I am proud to be the first inaugural chair of the Energy Storage Association, why I think it's so important. So there's no reason why you or your listeners will know about what I've done in advance of getting to this point, perhaps what skills and expertise I bring, not just in general politics and in advocacy and campaigning, but when I first came into Parliament, so previously I was a member of Parliament and I entered the House of Commons in 2010, shortly after I was appointed as a shadow minister for energy and climate change. So I spent 3 years immersed in the sector. It was a very steep learning curve. I came to love everything to do with energy and climate change. I was responsible on behalf of the opposition at the time, the Labour Party, for taking forward and to responding to not one but 2 energy bills. And certainly one of my passions during that time became all things to do with demand reduction and what more we can and should be doing to minimise energy poverty in this country, which is it continues to be a very, very serious issue, in part reflective of the constituency that I represented in Liverpool on Merseyside, and just because I'm very conscious of the fact that still in this country we have some of the most energy inefficient homes, and all of us are spending money on energy that is being wasted because we don't have adequate insulation, etc. So that's perhaps what brought me into the sector. Since leaving Parliament in the end of 2019, I continued in this area to maintain my passion and interest, working on all things to do with the COP conference. And most recently, just over a year ago, in fact, last year, I joined to become an advisory member, an advisor to a business called GS8. And GS8 is leading the way in this country of building and delivering zero carbon homes. And they are doing something very specific and world leading in the space of energy storage on one of their sites in Epping. So I was aware of that also. One of the new members of Parliament, the Member of Parliament for Newcastle under Lyme, Adam Jogi, introduced me to some of the businesses in his constituency that were working in and around the space of energy storage, which included the now CEO of the Energy Storage Association, Jason Howlett. I was helping him, supporting them in some of their endeavours, and that's, I suppose, what brought me into the sector, in particular over the course of the last year. And they suggested that I might consider joining them as their chair, which is what I'm now doing. So forgive me that I didn't perhaps answer that question, but I suppose for your
I think it's really important for our listeners across 70 countries. And I think for our listeners, if you go back to an early edition of Solar and Storage, where we had Keith, the former founder of Sunsick, it's obviously a real Liverpool powerhouse, Northwest coming together at the Energy Storage Association. And having spent most of my working career involved in Warrington and energy companies around there, I think it's great to hear.
I should perhaps then come on to the question that you then asked me, which is what's the point? And certainly what role do we expect the association itself to play? Certainly, I want it to help in terms of the success of the industry. There's a few different things. Why is it important to bring a sector together? It is about having a point of contact to bring that sector together for all parts of the energy storage industry. I suppose our main aim is to ensure that we're developing a dialogue with key government bodies, including NESO, the National Energy System operator, with GB Energy and with the National Grid. And as a representative body, we have a number of abilities. We can be a bridge, and that's the bridge between government and industry, which allows us to ensure success on both accounts. We've seen, I think, a lot of great strides over the course of the past year under the new government. We want to make sure those great strides become a success. We've seen things like the plans for net zero. We've seen the founding of GB Energy, which has as its focus providing clean, homegrown energy. We want to play a role in advising and informing government to ensure that on behalf of the whole industry, we are helping government to deliver on those ambitions. So we've seen the ambitions set out, but how do we make those aspirations become a reality? We also think we've got a really important role to play in representing the industry in terms of employment, training and education. there's lots of developments that need to take place to ensure that we're both creating and maintaining standards. So we've got some important work to do in that regard, and we've also got some important work to do in terms of supporting UK-based supply chains and to ensure that, as we've spoken in advance of this recording starting, ultimately investment, because if the money doesn't come forward, then these will only be grand plans if we can't actually ensure that we're delivering at scale.
Now, you brought up some very interesting points about the growing opportunities, how we've got the Asian leaders over, about to go to solar and storage with nearly 20,000 people at it. But how would you describe the current state of both the UK and the global marketplace for the energy storage sector?
So I think if we start by looking at the global markets, I think that all supply chains in the energy storage sector are clearly being dominated by Chinese production and Chinese products. However, there is a massive scope for the UK to take up space on the global stage. We've got massive potential to lead on innovation, harnessing the power of renewables and storage. And I think the key for us is really to be focusing on leading the charge in research and development. And I've already spoken and pointed to 2 universities that are really leading the way in that sector. As of this year, 2025, we've got over 6.8 gigawatts of operational storage. And that is, again, looking at the figures, a 509% increase since 2020. Which is very, very significant. So our role at the Energy Storage Association is really to ensure that that momentum is being matched by strategic planning and regulation. So, how can we coordinate? How can we ensure that the market can become truly transformative? And that's certainly where we see the opportunity is and where we're focusing our efforts.
Now, I like to describe myself as the happiest man in energy, but this interview would go amiss if we didn't really address the issues that has come up in Britain over the last few years, and a very challenging industrial landscape that did happen. So I want to learn about the lessons from Britishvolt. Now, Britishvolt was one of the great hopes of the UK battery manufacturer, and to reduce resilience on China and Asia, as we've discussed. At its peak, it was going to have 3,000 jobs and was going to be worth £700 million. But when it went bankrupt, it actually lost the state over £150 million to the taxpayers. What lessons should we learn from this, and how will the Energy Storage Association help the UK have more homegrown industry that's resilient and successful?
There's a few things to say in response to a really important question. And the first is that we can point to examples of where things haven't worked out and say that therefore we shouldn't take the risk. I think particularly in the sector, we should be taking risks in terms of investment, particularly in research and development. We do, I think, I certainly would acknowledge that Britishvolt's collapse was a sobering moment, but also I think it was a clarifying moment. I think it really made clear to me that the UK's role, as perhaps I've indicated in the last question, is not to play catch up with already established supply chains and manufacturers, but to really play to our strengths. And again, I draw on where we are, I think, leading the way in some areas, and we'll perhaps talk about it some more in a few minutes, on research and development. I think that really is an area where we can lead, where we can properly lead. But we need to be really, really targeted, and through organisations such as perhaps GB Energy, think about how we can take a stake in business that we financially support to ensure that we're not wasting money, that there are adequate controls in place. And that's really what we are doing as the Energy Storage Association, looking at how we can champion a coordinated national strategy with government and industry to ensure, again, I think this is where the pivot is, to think about energy storage as a national asset rather than just a market opportunity. And that's where we see the opportunity and the focus.
Now, recently, Bosch very kindly invited me to a geopolitical and global relations event where the chief economist of the Roland Berger Institute was Dr. David Bourne. And Dr. David Bourne raised with the whole audience that basically, if you were to look back at leadership lessons, that Germany got too dependent on cheap Russian gas. And obviously we can totally understand why an industry like Germany got dependent on cheap Russian gas. But getting a similar situation here, how do you think that you would address the situation that obviously China's been very successful. Their business leaders are here. They're obviously giving great technology and good value. But how do we make that balance that we're not dependent on a single nation and that we learn from those geopolitical lessons? And although it's a different industry, how can storage make sure it's not dependent on China and that the UK has its own sector, and you balance those relationships between China, the need for their technology, but also the need for us to grow our own technology and to be in the picture? How would you do that? It's a real challenge.
I think it's a really interesting point and a really interesting question. In a headline, I'd say it's all about the mix and having a mix. There are so many models that we can learn from, but I think the key is ensuring that we are not reliant on a single technology or a single supply chain. It's absolutely imperative, particularly when we're talking about energy security. We certainly need that mix of ideas and solutions from around the world to de-risk our own supply chain. And yes, of course, electrical energy storage is dominated by the Chinese supply chain. But here in the UK, we've got a strong thermal storage base. We're also leading development in solid state batteries and hydrogen alongside some European countries. I think there's lots to learn, for example, from the Australian experience, who have started to place more and more value on storage since learning that not adding storage to their renewable energy mix can be a costly error. And so we can both learn the lessons and the opportunities that have come from other countries. But my starting point is that we can't put all our eggs in one basket. We must not put all our eggs in one basket when it comes to our energy security and our energy mix. And that's why we should look at that diversity.
Let's talk about culture and leadership. Obviously, it's well documented that, through your own faith and through the challenges of the Labour Party at the time, you both had to leave, but you came back and you changed that culture, you changed that institution. What lessons can you bring to the energy storage world? Because although it's very different in a business sense, you still have that situation of barriers of culture about people accepting storage, the investment from local and national councils. And where we're trying to look at here is, how do you make that change happening from the lessons from the past, from both your political career and your own personal circumstances?
Well, it's an amazing question, and it's an amazing question to bring together both my faith and to and think about it in the context of cultural change and energy storage. It's the first time that I've been asked this, so forgive me for taking a moment. But certainly, well, I suppose I had the power of my convictions in terms of what led me to stand up and take a stance and challenge what was a status quo, what in my mind the wrong status quo at the time. And certainly trying to draw some parallels, although it's quite tricky, with energy storage. I'm attracted to the passion of the sector and the expertise of the sector because I think it's right. And I don't think it's rocket science, but we've got a big education piece, I think, to help inform decision makers, both in and around industry, but also within government, about why this is so important. For me, it's both, it makes economic sense. It also makes moral sense in terms of the stewardship of our natural resources and ensuring that we can achieve what we need to in terms of net zero. So it's regrettable, I think, that we're in the position that we're in, that we're still having to make the case for energy storage, and where it's kind of the poor relation and it's still playing catch up, because in my mind, it just makes sense. And it's absurd that we are not fully benefiting from the opportunities that energy storage presents. But I'm here to play my part to support those businesses that are making a difference, to support the research and development, and I feel confident that we're going to make great strides to ensure that energy storage is seen as a vital component, not just a nice to have add-on.
You've been in frontline politics. We asked this to Michael Gove the other day, but what was the best day and the worst day in your political career? Because unlike the majority of our listeners, you've not only been in the House of Commons, you've been in the House of Lords, you've been in both houses. So can you tell our listeners what it's like, both the best day and the worst day in politics, about the challenges and about the reward?
Well, I certainly think that politics is becoming more alive to the challenges that short-term decision-making brings, or the fact that we don't realise the benefits by taking those short-term decisions. I think it's helpful in this country that we do have some long-term targets and aims, albeit that they might not be as robust as we'd like them to, but we certainly have a direction of travel for us to collectively as a country work towards. It is tricky. I'm not going to say that it's not. I mean, the short-termism of politics doesn't help for things that require like national infrastructure, long-term investment and planning and businesses. But that's why the wide education piece for society and for communities and for politics at all levels is so important, for it to be that common endeavour. So irrespective of who the leader is, be that at council level or in terms of the country, that if we can make it that it's a given and it's collectively accepted, then it doesn't matter who's in charge. It's such an honour to have been appointed to the House of Lords and to start in the second chamber. I'm only really in my 4th month of actually in the chamber and actually here, because we've had the summer season, which has taken us away. It is different. It's a really important job in terms of revising legislation to give scrutiny to new laws before us, perhaps quite distinct from my previous role as an elected member of Parliament, where I had a constituency and I had constituents who ran businesses. And there was lots of things that I got to do which would not have been in full public view or glare, quietly behind the scenes, that would make a real difference to individuals and to the businesses that they were running. So I can think of quite a few examples of where, as a constituency MP, I really supported a business to enter a foreign market, or to unlock a challenge that they had with HMRC on issues to do with tax or whatever it may be that was really limiting their ability to proceed. And that I took great fulfillment from that, because it was also producing jobs in my constituency and providing livelihoods. And not to great fanfare, but it was, very fulfilling, particularly as an opposition MP. So when I was in the House of Commons, I did so in opposition for just shy of 10 years. And so it's those perhaps things that kind of provided great fulfilment. I suppose some of the more challenging things were particularly businesses that were, not many, but there were businesses that went out of business, and seeing the direct impact of people that had, invested time and energy and their money into trying to grow something and it hadn't been successful. Obviously, the personal difficulty that brought, but also the impact it had on jobs for people that worked in and around my constituency. That was particularly difficult, I think. And again, not something you would have read about in the newspapers, but as a constituency MP, that's it's very strong connections to the businesses in my patch. That was more tricky.
Well, we are 15 months into the new government. They got elected in summer 2024. I think where we were encouraged as a podcast is that energy was centre stage, like throughout the 15 months, whether it was the agenda going into the general election, whether it was the focus that's been in terms of spending decisions or treasury. No one can doubt that energy is the core part of this government. What do you think the successes have been, and where do you feel that the benefits going forward could come for the energy storage sector?
Well, thank you. I think it's a really important question, and it's important to reflect over the course of just over the past year in terms of what's happened, what's changed, and what opportunities present ahead of us. In terms of successes, I'd point to two things. I think first and foremost, the flexibility roadmap is really, really important, and also the creation of GB Energy. Two key pillars, two very practical things that we've seen come forward, which have huge potential for the energy storage space in the UK. But of course, we want more. We are impatient in terms of what we'd like to see. I think that's just generally the case for all businesses and citizens of the UK in a time of challenge and flux. More broadly, there is always more to do. So we are looking forward to the Warm Homes Plan. We think that's a really important moment where we hope to see energy storage help in the fight to tackle energy poverty. We're also really focused on looking at how we might stop adding to some problems that we see, in particular with new home and with new grid scale generation, because we are clear that without mandatory storage, we're going to see some additional challenges present. And we think mandatory storage is absolutely integral to ensuring that we can help and play our part in the fight to aiding and to tackling energy poverty. All too often, people blame the grid as being a limiting factor. We hear that time and time again, and we want to see developers doing so much more to take responsibility for these factors. A new solar farm without storage or new homes without clean generation are both problems and add so much to the lamented pressure on the grid. We very much think that these issues need to be tackled at the source. Currently, future home standards do not currently have storage as a default. We think that's a problem, and certainly something we're kind of really pushing on, because adding that as a standard would make a massive difference, and it can be changed. Additionally, we've got the challenge coming from April 2027, when residential energy storage systems are due to be charged VAT. Again, something that we're really pushing on, because if we can remove it permanently, we think we're going to make residential storage so much more attractive to the consumer. We've seen some great strides from the government, but there's always much more to be done at that VAT point. And obviously, we're having this conversation in the wake of there being some indication that we're going to see movement more generally on VAT and energy bills. We think this could go some way to unlocking the opportunity that energy storage presents, and making sure that cost isn't in that inherent barrier, particularly at a consumer level rather than a business level.
Well, I think we all agree that. I mean, I think that it is kind of crazy that you can still build, either as big industry or as a private home builders, you can build stuff that doesn't answer that question. We had previously on the podcast Jan Rosenau, which said that not just the storage, but the insulation side is so key, that housing stock and building stock is so essential to the storage solution. I do always laugh, though, when it snows in London. There's 2 buildings where the snow disappears quicker than any other building in the UK. Now, when I go to solar and storage, I think this will be about my 4th or 5th one when I go this week, I'm always impressed about how the technology is reducing emissions. And one of your members, Sunsing, I've got to say, when Keith took me around their stand last time, I was absolutely blown away about what could be done, what could be replaced in terms of energy things. And I think a lot of our listeners understand how storage can replace emissions. But when we get to the Energy Trilemma, how does it actually help the UK with energy security and affordability? And I think we can hear from your answers now that background of looking after the people of interest of Liverpool, which is a very socially diverse city at both ends, from the big entrepreneurs like the Peel Group, through to some of the areas where actually that choice between, heat and meat is very real. How do you see storage helping with those issues? Because sometimes it's very hard to put all 3 together.
Absolutely. And thank you for asking the question, what is that trilemma? In terms of affordability, energy storage guarantees the availability of clean energy when we actually need it. I take that for granted. I think, again, I come back to that education piece, which I think still got some way to go before that is in the public psyche, and that is, at the forefront of businesses' minds. We are still currently seeing hundreds of millions of pounds wasted on energy curtailment when too much energy is being generated at the wrong times. Again, I just don't think enough people know that. They don't know it's an issue. They don't know it's a challenge. They also don't know it's a massive opportunity. We know this incurs unnecessarily high costs when renewable generation is low and demand is higher. And energy storage is fantastic because it solves that issue. It really speaks to the heart of the opportunity and the heart of the challenge. Storing excess energy and therefore creating demand is absolutely imperative, and releasing that energy in shortfall, in my mind, and in so many that work in the sector's mind, is the solution. Again, so we just have some work to do to make that fact known and make that opportunity more widespread. I think it's important to note as well that this can come from all types of renewable energy. Again, the education piece, this is about pumped hydro, it's about converting energy to hydrogen or long duration energy storage, especially when we use combined thermal energy with domestic storage. We look at utility grid scale electrical energy storage. It's about all those different opportunities. We've seen, in fact, I was just looking at some of the figures, we've seen negative grid pricing during the summer months. And again, that key issue of curtailment, which really is adding hundreds of pounds to energy bills at a time when they are so high for individual households. The increase in percentage of overall disposable income that's going towards energy massively increased over the course of the past 10 years. And again, looking at the surveys of businesses where they say, this is at the heart of our challenge when we look at profit, when we look at profitability, our energy costs, are so sensitive and we have to do something about that. So if every home and business could access the cheaper power and store it in order to power their homes and businesses in periods of high demand, then we know that this is going to ensure that the grid will have less stress and energy is essentially going to be cheaper for those domestic and business consumers. I think, again, it speaks to both the challenges and make sure that we're providing that solution. And in terms of security, energy security allows the UK to create that buffer against geopolitical disruptions. And obviously we've seen those really come to the fore, and we've had some acute geopolitical disruptions. I mean, there'll be more than disruptions over the course of the past 2 or 3 years. We've also seen volatile imports, and by holding energy locally and releasing it when needed, again, we're able to mitigate against those wider geopolitical challenges. I suppose just adding one final point, if we look at distributed storage and the opportunity for distributed storage in both homes and businesses, in my mind, that really creates a more robust energy system that is harder to disrupt. So I think energy storage really speaks to that energy trilemma and answers it successfully for all 3 pillars and shows where we can and should be making a difference, both in terms of our energy security from the geopolitical sense, but first and foremost, financially and economically, to be saving everyone money.
Yeah, we've got 2 big meaty issues left before our quick fire questions that we go on to. And I guess rather than focusing so much on the technical side is the financial side. So, my day in, day out when I'm not on the airwaves is helping investment banks look at energy companies to buy, invest in, and we sit down with them. There's always a nervousness when we get onto things like storage and other areas around the storage sector, because there's been highlights and lowlights. But I was just wondering today, in the 2 meaty topics, and we'll come on to it in a second, also about getting the right talent and so on. But the first one is, how do we create an environment for investors to really put money into UK energy storage and getting away from sort of government incentives mean it's great, and then when they go, it's terrible? I remember when the Green Bank went pop and or being stopped by the government, it was a nightmare. So I was just wondering, how can we get that sort of stable investment ground for all those CEOs and bank finance sector people we work with?
Well, and obviously it speaks to the heart of the opportunity for the sector and some of the challenges that we might find at this current time. I mean, I'm clear that the key to unlocking sustained investment is demonstrating that this is not just a social case, a moral case, a climate imperative, but that it's a bankable asset with predictable returns and long-term relevance. Really speaking to those financial markets and those investors, and for them to know that there is a long-term return. We need to ensure that we're guaranteeing returns for investors, both large and small, with cap and collar schemes or money available to make storage compatible with grid services such as frequency response or balancing. We need to ensure that we're providing those long-term financial returns, that stability, with long-term policy frameworks. Again, the government's got a really important role to play in all of this to ensure that we're giving investors consistent incentives and confidence in their future returns. And particularly in a space where, let's be honest, under the previous government, we saw schemes come forward that gave investors confidence and were very alluring and with great promise, and then they were cut short and or cut in half, and that's I don't think it helped the sector in its entirety, and certainly in terms of investor consideration. So we need to stop all of that and make sure that at the very least that promises that are made and any incentives that are brought forward are provided with long-term assurances to investors.
Now, completely different end of the scale. We're both just talking at the start of the interview about our delightful school runs and so on and so forth. But the reality is we are very big on TikTok as a podcast. We are passionate about getting the best talent. It's awesome to be sat here and to see that a baroness has dedicated her shadow time in politics to energy. Now her choice of, when you can be a chair, this issue. So it makes me excited. But how do we get those people who are maybe teenage years or at university now to say that I'm one of the most talented people, I'm in that bracket where I could probably get a few different graduate jobs? How do we get them to go into energy and energy storage? Because I think that talent will only help us move ahead in the market. And you said you've been working with the likes of Durham and Keel. So yeah, I was just interested how we get that talent to be as excited as we are about energy.
Well, I am really excited, and if I was starting my academic career again, I would certainly consider it as something to pursue and go into, because there's such massive opportunity. I mean, for me, it kind of really brings together social purpose, innovation, and diversity. It really is at the cutting edge in terms of bringing together the climate solution and the future. This is the area where we are very much still in our infancy. Reflected in the fact that the Energy Storage Association is only just being created, but again, providing and presenting that opportunity. It's not just a career, also it's a way of contributing to society and to the future. And because of the opportunity in the sector, I was looking at the figures, it is a growing sector. I've obviously pointed to how much it's grown just over the course of the last 4 years, but this sector is growing almost 5 times faster than the overall job market. Again, so for any person in there doing their A-levels, might have done their first degree, looking at what their second degree might be, if they're looking to do a master's, this really is a sector that presents fantastic and enormous opportunity. And
before we go into our punchy quickfire questions, how do people stay in touch with the Energy Storage Association?
Oh, well, thank you so much for giving us that opportunity. We have a website. If you Google Energy Storage Association, we're on LinkedIn and other social media channels as well. Definitely get in touch. We're growing our membership all the time. We've got our founding members, but we've got new members joining us almost every week at the moment. Looking forward to joining you at the exhibition and the conference coming up later this week. We are already in the heart of government in terms of being invited to be part of those really important conversations. And I would welcome anyone, either kind of as an interested business or individual, to join us and academics also to be part of that really important work going forward.
And our quick fire questions then that we ask all of our guests. Whether it's time or money, where would you invest in the energy sector in the next 12 months? I think we might be shocked by this. Well,
of course, and no surprise that I'm going to say energy storage. But coupled with that is cybersecurity. Because we can't have, I don't think, effective solutions in energy storage if we're not also considering the cyber elements. Because so much of, I've been visited some of our member businesses. So much of what we do is what happens online as well. So the two very much have to go hand in hand. Again, particularly talking about the geopolitical challenges, we have to ensure that the sector is robust and protected, coupled with thinking about energy flexibility and tackling energy poverty as well. Those three things all together.
Yeah, we're very much thinking about our friends at JLR in the last month that have had huge challenges with production as a result of cybersecurity and across the board. I think the next punchy question is your good friends in the other house. What would you like them to do in the next 12 months?
Well, I want to see energy storage and energy storage technology at the heart of all decision making on energy. That it's not, as I said previously, just a nice to have add on. It's something right at the heart of and right at the forefront of all of our energy solutions. And that should also be irrespective of someone's the size of a business and irrespective of someone's income. This can't just be for people that can afford it. It's how do we make it sure that we're providing energy storage for all tenants and for all homeowners or people that are renting. That's certainly something I'm looking at in the other work that I do with GS8, but making sure that we're not widening the inequalities, we are closing those gaps as well.
And I think that's our final question that we ask everyone, but it's quite a personally related one today, is what we want the consumer to do in the next 12 months. We always have a go at government and business. We're quite good at that podcast, but I'm interested in what you want the consumer to do. And the reason I say it's quite a personal question is that I'm rebuilding my whole house at the moment. There's going to be a beautiful Wolf Power Club podcast studio in there that'll be open to other companies to use. But I was just interested whether you are in the middle of purchasing a home, building a home, if you think there's something the consumer should be looking for rather than just, is it near the best school and best hospital in the area?
And indeed, and also for tenants as well. So if you're a tenant of social housing, what should your housing provider be doing? What can you as a tenant be asking of them and or your landlord if you're a private renter as well? It's not just for people that own or are building homes. I suppose the key point is explore home and community energy storage. Explore it, see if it's an option that you can pursue. Again, what we're looking at now, and what's I think really exciting, is that there's some new packages, financial opportunities for people to be able to access things in a way that they haven't done previously. Is there an opportunity for you to add a battery system to store excess energy where you live, if you've got solar panels, for example? Or perhaps is there an opportunity for you to look into joining a local energy cooperative or a local community energy storage scheme? It's getting that into the nation's psyche to consider at the very least when moving home, building a home, buying a home.
Yeah, we'd love to thank you for your time today. It's a busy few weeks ahead. So we've got the global community in the UK for storage, with solar and storage coming up. We've also got Labour Party conference, but I also love this time of year because we're right into the heart of everyone trying to get everything done before, we end up in that sort of December sort of more festive season. Also to say to our listeners, we are part of the Spectator Energy Summit, where we will have government, opposition, energy leaders, energy investors, and I'm certainly pushing for Energy Storage Association to be there. And so if you guys want a discount for that, go on to Wolf Power Club 25, and there's a link below, and you can get discounted tickets and join myself, Michael Gove, and let's hope the Energy Storage Association. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.